Hi friends, Steve here in Santa Barbara, California at the Santa Barbara Cemetery, and I'm just inside the gates here. The street behind me is Channel Drive. You come in through the gates here, you make the first left, and this section here is called the Montecito Urn Garden. These are cremated remains that are buried in the ground. And this is where the cremation remains of actor Eric Christmas are interred. Here's his gravesite right here. I discovered his final resting place on findagrave.com, but it didn't have a GPS, didn't have a section listed as far as where he was laid to rest. So I called the cemetery and they said, oh yeah, we know exactly who he is. And they were very happy to give me directions to his gravesite. In fact, I assumed that probably he was over there with the within the mausoleums or in the columbarium area, and they said no, it's actually the exact opposite direction. Instead of making a right when you come in the gate, they said make a left. That's the very first section here, and apparently they had just chopped down part of this tree right here, and he said there's a tree stump right there, and he's pretty close to the tree stump, and they gave me the number. They said 217 is where he was located. And sure enough, he's right here next to the marker that says 217, just a few feet in from the street. So very easy to find. I added a GPS just in case anyone wants to use the GPS on Find a Grave Memorial page, on his Find a Grave Memorial page, to locate it. That'll bring you here as well. So one of my favorite movies of all time is Harold and Maude. I believe it came out in 1971. It became a cult classic. It's a midnight movie in the art house theaters. And that's, I think, where I first saw it, back probably right around the time it came out. And Eric Christmas plays the priest in that film. And that's how I knew him. I didn't realize he'd been in other things. And then I did a little research and I started reading about him and discovered that he was also in a very popular series of movies called Porky's 1, 2, and 3. And he played Mr. Carter. I believe he was the principal. And I do remember seeing those movies as well. And with Christmas right around the corner, I thought, what better place to start my trip today than at Eric Christmas's gravesite? Being here today also reminded me that nearly 4 years ago, I visited the gravesite of actor Chuck Mitchell, who played Porky Wallace in the movies. I've been waiting for the right time to share that visit, and it turns out that today is that day. It's been nearly 40 years since the first Porky's premiered back in 1981. So I'm going to give you an update on many of the other cast members as well. I always find it interesting to know who's still alive and who's no longer with us 40 years later. And I'm a little bit embarrassed to admit that I never made the connection between the director of this movie and the director of one of the most popular Christmas classics of all time. In 1974, director Bob Clark directed Black Christmas. Then in 1981 went on to direct Porky's. Then in 1983 directed the holiday classic A Christmas Story. And by the way, Porky's became one of the highest grossing movie comedies of all time. Eric Christmas died from natural causes in Camarillo, California, which is just a little south of the cemetery here, on July 22nd in the year 2000 at the age of 84. Tragically, Bob Clark and his 22-year-old son were killed in a head-on car collision in Pacific Palisades, California on April 4th, 2007. Bob was 67 years old. Sadly, the final resting places of Bob and his son Ariel are unknown at this time. My first visit here to the Santa Barbara Cemetery was, I believe, about a year and a half ago. And it happened to be kind of a foggy, ugly day. So since today is such a beautiful day, I thought you might like to take another quick look before I head on to the next cemetery. It's pretty hard to believe that this is the view from the cemetery. Don't you agree? Can you imagine a more beautiful final resting place than this cemetery overlooking the ocean here? If you're not familiar with the movie Porky's, it's a teenage comedy that involves the students at Angel Beach High School in Florida, and it's set in the not-so-innocent 1950s. Imagine a much more R-rated version of the 1973 film American Graffiti, which is another one of my all-time favorite movies. Some of the late cast members from Porky's are buried out of state, while others were cremated and scattered, or their final resting places are undisclosed and unknown at this time. Nancy Parsons, who played Beulah Ballbricker, died from congestive heart failure in La Crosse, Wisconsin on January 5, 2001 at the age of 58. She's buried in Viroqua Cemetery in Viroqua, Wisconsin. And she and Eric Christmas share one of the funniest and most memorable scenes in the movie. Tommy Turner, who was played by actor Wyatt Knight, was the subject of that funny and memorable scene. Sadly, Knight died from a self-inflicted gunshot wound in Kula, Hawaii on October 25, 2011, at the age of 56. His final resting place is unknown at this time. Alex Karras, who played Porky's brother, Sheriff Wallace, died from kidney failure in Los Angeles on October 10, 2012, at the age of 77. He was cremated and also has no final resting place to visit at this time. Wayne Maunder, who played Mr. Kavanaugh, died from heart disease in Brattleboro, Vermont on November 11, 2018, at the age of 80. He was also cremated with no final resting place to visit. And when was the last time you visited a cemetery and spotted kayakers? That's definitely something you don't see every day. And I'm happy to say that many of the cast members are still alive. It's hard to believe that Dan Monahan, who plays Pee-wee, the star of the movie, is now 65 years old. Kim Cattrall, who plays Honeywell, is 64 years old, and she's currently starring in the TV show Filthy Rich. Boyd Gaines, who plays Coach Brackett, is now 67 years old. Tony Ganios, who plays Meat, is now 61 years old. Scott Columby, who plays Brian Schwartz, the Jewish kid, is 68 years old. Cyril O'Reilly, who plays Timmy, is 62 years old. Roger Wilson, who plays Mickey, is now 64 years old. Art Hindle, who plays Officer Ted, is 72 years old. Mark Harrier, who plays Billy, is now 66 years old. Khaki Hunter, who plays Wendy, is now 65 years old. Doug McGrath, who plays Coach Warren, is 85 years old. And Susan Clark, who plays Cherry Forever, is now 77 years old. 157 miles southeast of Santa Barbara Cemetery is Riverside Cemetery in the city of Riverside. And this is where Porky Wallace, or Mr. Porky, is buried. To find his gravesite, you drive through the front gate and just drive straight back until you reach section 32 on the left-hand side, and his gravesite is number 839. Chuck Mitchell appeared in a couple of dozen movies and TV shows during his career, but he'll probably always best be remembered for his role as Porky, or Mr. Porky, the sleazy owner of the strip club called Porky's. Mitchell died from cirrhosis of the liver in Hollywood, California on June 22, 1992, at the age of 64. Like so many cemeteries, at least here in the Southern California area, this one is also located right next door to an airport. If you'd like to watch planes take off and land, Southern California cemeteries are a pretty nice place to do it. And in case you're wondering, that plane just flew out of March Air Force Base. This week, I want to give a shout out and a very big thank you to all of my new subscribers. Thank you all so much for spreading the word and helping my channel to grow. And happy holidays, everyone. So if you enjoyed today's trip down memory lane, I hope you'll join me on another one by clicking and watching the video here. So until next time, thanks for sharing the memories, everybody.